fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren and the Karate Kid, David Martino. Karate.
Hi, karate. Yeah. I'm wearing it.
Hi, karate. You probably are. You're probably the only guy left in this whole world that even has it. And you probably got from the originals, probably from the 60s or something, right?
Yeah, I found it in the basement.
Yeah.
Basement House of Mystery.
Yeah, that's where you hang out there. You never get out, Have you used your, hemorrhoid ointment yet? That you have to be careful. You know that?
Yes.
Cause you buy it on Facebook. No more buying on Facebook.
No.
See, that poor lady died.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
Be careful. I don't know.
Safety first.
Yeah, safety first. Yeah, safety over money. Okay, what do we got here? We got an author today, and her book is called Buried Secrets. Sounds like something you'd be involved in. So, Sheri Lewis Wohl, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Dave just got in the Guinness Book of World Records.
I did.
Yeah, he had another 783 Big Macs last year. So now he's got 27,000 Big Macs in his life he's had. So yeah, it's really it's impressive. Yeah, it's impressive. He's the epitome of good health.
Yes.
So listen, buried secrets. So what have you got secrets? What kind of secrets are you burying nowadays? Like what's going on?
Oh, I bury all sorts of secrets. In fact, I had one reader who most of my books are set in Eastern Washington. And she said to me, I didn't know we had so many killers in Eastern Washington. I'm like, yep, you just never know who your next door neighbor is, do ya?
Yeah. Well, Spokane, right? It's rough.
We've had some interesting individuals here. In my day job before, I just recently retired, but in the day job, I worked for the federal judiciary for 33 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, that you really don't know who your neighbors are is very, very true. I learned that over the last 3 decades.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So there are bodies in buried secret, and I use that in the plural.
Of course. Makes it more interesting. I remember Mark Furman worked on the radio station there.
Yeah, he did. During the Robert Yates investigation, because, Washington State seems to have a little serial killer issue, and we had a rather prolific one here in Spokane. So.
Yeah, well, I moved away, that's why.
Well...
Well, it's interesting, the whole thing. So what made you decide to write? Like, what got you into writing?
Oh, gosh, I've always, even when I was a little kid, I used to pretend I was a writer, and I sort of laughed when we had to clean out my grandparents' house. My grandfather was a voracious reader. But what I had done as a little kid is I'd set up a little office in their house, my little desk where I would write. And my idea of writing at that point was I put my name in every single one of the books. And so as we cleaned those books off the shelf, you opened them up and there was Sheri in various colors of crayon. And those were the books I wrote as a little kid. And so I just kept going and going as I got older. And it took me a long time, but I finally got there.
Well, I would imagine you've got a lot of time in the rest home, you know.
True story. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
How mean. So listen, what's the premise of this book?
So in Buried Secrets here, like I said, I worked for the judiciary. So, I worked with U.S. attorney's offices. I worked with the U.S. probation offices. And so in this story, the main character is a U.S. probation officer who was shot in the line of duty. And so rather, a little PTSD, decided to go out early because she just didn't want to go back to work. And it kind of came about because as part of the job, even though I was in the financial arena for the courts, we would have briefings, security briefings, and there were times where they'd say, okay, be alert if you're walking across the courtyard because there's been a threat against all employees about shooting, as you walk to work. One time the briefing was, there's been threats, please vary the way you drive home so that you're not going the same way all the time. So these things were sort of on my mind. So my thought in this one was, what if? And the offenders are getting more violent. So, our probation officers really are in, sometimes very dangerous situations. So in this instance, she was shot. She was also, because this is something I did, so it shows up a lot in my books, is I was a human remains detection canine handler in the search and rescue arena here in Eastern Washington and North Idaho. And so my character Tuesday was a probation officer and a search and rescue canine handler. And so as part of her healing, she goes home to her mother's house in Hunters, which is it's here in Eastern Washington, had a beautiful lake there and everything. But this is not a good relationship with her mother, but mother's dying of cancer. She's like, I'm going to go home. I'll take care of it. It'll give me a chance to heal. It'll all be good. And then the secondary character is Addie Caine, who is a private investigator from the Midwest, whose brother disappeared 20 years earlier, and she's been spending 20 years trying to find him, and finally locates a credit card receipt that was the last one they could find, and it was from the Hunters area. And so they both end up there together and then start finding things that aren't quite right.
Yeah. Story of my life.
Yeah, mine too.
Her credit card receipt, was that for like Chick-fil-A or what?
Oh no. See, we haven't had Chick-fil-A in this area until about 3 years ago. So no.
Oh.
This would have been a like gas station receipt.
Of course.
Yeah.
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 Any particular reason you chose your main character to be like a probation officer?
Just because, it's an interesting job, gives her a kind of a unique perspective on things. And I know lots of probation officers, so they're my friends.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And it was just like, what if this were me? And what would I do had I been in that position? What would I have done? And so that's really sort of where I picked up. Plus the fact that, I knew I was going to step out of that arena. And so I felt a little freer to write about it than if I was still working in that area.
Right. So I guess I would imagine that whole career life of yours really influenced your writing, and even in something like this book.
Well, I tell people all the time, because all of my books have paranormal elements to them. I always had said, because I worked the day job in an organization that is really traditional, very, very conservative, that when I stepped away from work, I wanted something that my mind could go to that wasn't that. And so the paranormal elements gave me that sort of escape. Plus the fact that I've loved all that kind of stuff even since I was a little kid. But it really was my escape from what I saw, 40 hours a week.
Right. So you see dead people.
Becoming a human remains detection canine handler, yeah, that was kind of part of that job, literally speaking.
That would be a hard job at times, I guess.
People say that too, and they ask you why you decided to do that. And I always said, well, first of all, working with the dogs is magical. I mean, what these dogs can do is absolutely incredible. So it was an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. But the second part of it was in my head, and even though this is maybe not, I mean, logically speaking, I know what it is. But if there's someone out there and when they would call us in, the presumption is they're gone because we were a recovery team. And so even though I know they're gone, it would bother me if we didn't, whether it was me or another one of the teams, if we had to stop the search because we couldn't find them, because in my head they were out there cold and alone. And I said it was always more important to me to bring them home than leave them cold and alone. So that's why I did it.
Where does your PI character come from? How much liberty do you take with that character in what a private investigator can do in the real world?
Oh, I take a fair amount of liberties, and it's just because that one of the ladies that I worked with for years and years and years, and we always said, you know what, when we retire, let's be PIs. You cover the south part of the county, and I'll cover the north part of the county. We'll be PIs, and we had in the federal judiciary, they have what we call court security officers, and I would say probably 90% of them are retired police department, sheriffs, deputies, that kind of thing. Anyway, several of them did PI work, and they're like, yeah, we'll train you too. It'll be great. So we didn't do it, needless to say. But and then being a canine handler for search and rescue, I worked with law enforcement. So in my day job, I worked with law enforcement. In my volunteer work, I worked with law enforcement. So I routinely pick their brains and say, hey, can I do this? And sometimes what cracks me up with them a lot of times is they'll say to me, Sheri, just do it. Just do it. It's fiction. It doesn't have to be 100% right. Tweak it if you need to. So I'm like, okay, Deputy Schultz told me. So yeah, I will take liberties.
And violence. How do you portray violence through the book? Do you display a lot of it, or do you just do it at home and not write it?
Yeah, most of the time for me, violence is off screen. You know that it's happened, and sometimes it is bad. But I am not into like the gore side of it. I don't necessarily have to describe it in detail. So that's kind of a thing of mine. I know some people like to get more graphic about it, but I kind of take the same approach. Sex and violence, they're a bit off screen. Yeah, they're going to be there, but it's not going to be graphic. But you're still going to know what's going on.
Your main character, Tuesday Johnson, how do you describe that relationship that you have with her? Like, is it like friends, sisters? Do you hear them, or is it mechanical? Like, what's your process?
Oh, for me and Tuesday, I did a workshop this last year with Robert Degoni, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with his books.
Oh, yeah,
he does
we know
these,
him. I know him.
Yeah. Bob is a great guy. But one of the comments he made to me was that speaking for himself, he said, my characters are not me, but they are of me. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly it. So when I'm creating a character, they are of me, but they are not me. And so it may be a case of, I've actually done that, or I've walked in that pair of shoes for a little while. But sometimes it's a case of, if this were me, what would I be doing? How would I do this? How would I see this? So I think in many respects, the characters are just of me.
Well, can you hear your characters? Do you have an inner monologue? Is that how you create dialogue and
yeah.
write prose, or
I
is there
do.
another way?
I'll either have it running in my head with an actual conversation, or I will be sitting here, like talking to myself. In the car, I talk to myself, and I may be pinging back and forth in the conversation. So yeah, I mean, it's both inner monologue and literally speaking it. Because sometimes if I say it out loud and I hear it, it comes across different than if I'm like typing it or if I'm just thinking it. So, I do a bit of acting, and I learned some of that from acting and voice acting, is that hearing it really sort of changes things.
When you're sitting in your car and you're talking to yourself and all that stuff, has a cop ever come by and said, "Excuse me, and do you have a license? Do you just parked in your house, or like kind of?" I mean,
it used to be kind of bad before cell phones were the norm and the wireless thing. So
Yeah.
You see people talking to themselves all the time, and you don't know if they're actually talking to themselves or they're talking on the phone. So that has made me look not quite as weird. But yeah, there are moments where I haven't ever been stopped by a cop and said, you want to walk this line for us?
yeah.
But yeah, I have had some looks on occasion as I'm working through something out loud.
I was going to say, when you're in downtown Seattle, you could always find other people doing the same and walk with them. So it looks like you're talking to each other, but you're not. But it's just kind of, it's a good cover,
Yes, Spokane's a little bit that way too these days. Yeah, so not hard to blend in. Mm-hmm.
It's been a while since I was downtown Spokane.
It's changed.
Yeah, everything kind of does. Gets busier and bigger, and more stuff goes on. Mm-hmm. Did you write this with some sort of a meaning, or maybe it came up organically, some sort of a so the reader takes it home, reads it, and they're enjoying all the violence and sex and stuff you've written, and then but is there something else you want them to take away?
Well, a little bit, yeah. It sort of part of it came about, or the two main characters both come from fairly well-to-do families, and that was an intentional choice on my part. I worked with a woman years ago that came from one of the wealthiest and most prominent families in this area. And so it was born from getting to know her and really realizing that all that glitters is not gold. Because as we became friends and as she opened up to me, it was astonishing, the real nature of what was behind that facade. And so in this book, you have one character who, comes from a well-established, very, very comfortable family, and yet you have a mother that's made no bones about the fact she really hates you. And then in the other instance, again, you have another woman who came from an extremely wealthy family, but her mother is an addict. And so you're seeing, this coming from a substance abuse family and a neglectful family, but that you're also seeing these things are equal opportunity employers. Addiction can come whether you're poor or whether you're very rich, and it can cause these kinds of issues. But how do you overcome that? Where do you rise above it? So, yeah, like I say, both of these characters, it is that, again, in my head was that all that glitters is not gold.
Do you have a character in there like Ken? I'm just Ken.
I'm just Ken.
just as kind of,
No, I don't have a just Ken.
See, that's what I want. Well, speaking of Ken, bad guy. How do you write the bad guy? How do you write the evil intent person? Like, what is your means of getting into that character? Because being that you hear the voices and you're very in tuned with your character, so you've got Tuesday and Addie and all this stuff going on, and you're fighting in the car and things are going all crazy, dogs barking. How about the evil character?
For me, that a lot of them, because I have them in pretty much every book.
I was going to say you have a lot of them
Yeah, I have a lot of them.
at home.
It's a lot of what I've learned over the last 3 decades, because there are some not good people out there, and they, like I say, they literally can live next door to you and you would never know it. And through the course of my career, I saw so many people who could put on the facade of being this fine, upstanding person, and you find out they were really not. And I will give you a good example. We were working on transferring criminal debt into a new program and had to do some of it manually, and I came across the name of a gentleman, and I'm like, wow, when I was younger, I went out with a guy by that name. And so I looked it up and I looked at the town he came from, and I'm like, well, the guy I knew came from that town. And I got to dig in a little deeper, and sure as the world, it was the same guy. And so I thought, well, what did he do? That seemed so odd to me. He was a successful guy, had a great job, was very well educated, came from a good family. It was child pornography. I was totally creeped out. But that's an example of what we sometimes don't know, that they can put on this mask of respectability. They don't look evil. Evil doesn't just jump up and go, ooh, here I am. You can tell just by looking at me. So I have a lot of those themes in my books just because that was such a part of my life day to day, learning about who people were.
Well, actually, we have him on the other line right now.
Yeah.
Oh, boo.
Yeah.
Hey, so being in that business so long and doing it, and because, we have a couple of old employees of government agencies like CIA and stuff that work as hosts, and some of them still have tendencies to do some of the things they've learned. Do you still have that behaviors thing? Like, you probably look at people differently. You go out to a store and you hear someone crumpling paper, you thinking, oh, they're stealing something. Like, are you still keen on people's behaviors, and you're still kind of policing in a sense in your mind?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Even so, I worked at the actual court here in Spokane for 28 years. And then I moved to the administrative office out of Washington, D.C., even though I was still located in Eastern Washington. When I moved to the AO, I was sort of out of the kind of the day-to-day thing. So it was because I was writing policy for the country. But
oh, you did that.
I did that. Yeah, it was really fun.
I liked it a lot.
You see so much of it. And like I said, even though I worked in finance, what I tell people a lot is when you're in the finance department, the federal courts, the thing is, everybody who's convicted or pleads guilty to a crime has a mandatory monetary assessment. And so my department, those cases every single one of them went through my department. So we saw them all. And so we saw who these people were. We saw what they did. And it does change you. And it changes the way you look at things and look at people. And it's kind of trust no one mentality. And I think a lot of my cop friends would say the same thing.
See, Dave, she knows you. She's seen you.
Yes. I can't hide.
You can't hide. You can run, but you can't hide.
And I still have a really fast dog too.
Yeah. Oh, see, you're in trouble now.
Well, my cat.
Oh yeah, he's got a big mean cat. So look at him.
He's a sweetie.
Yeah, poor cat. How long does it take you to do one of these books when you do characters and all this stuff? Like, how long does it take you to get one together?
I usually do like one a year. Especially when I was doing search and rescue and working, and it was like it was all I could do to get all that stuff done. Then I gave up search and rescue, decided to let the younger folks do that. I mean, you're climbing mountains and yeah. So I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's time for, we had some real good younger people coming in with some great dogs. And I'm like, yeah, time for me to step out. So last year, which was the first year I wasn't doing search and rescue, I did 2 books, but I was still working. And it was like, yeah, that was a little much. So right now I'm just finishing. In fact, I have to turn it in. I think you're going to Left Close Crime, aren't you, Al?
Yeah, but don't tell anyone.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. My bad. I have to turn it in when I get home from Left Close Crime. And then I'm not contracted for anything else right at the moment, so I can kind of do whatever I want. So we'll see.
Do you plan on making this a series?
I haven't done a series for a while. I've been doing standalones, and so I may revisit. I did a book called All That Remains, also another search dog book. And I may come back to my publisher and see about doing book 2 on that one, but I haven't broached it yet, so we'll see. Series they're a lot of work. To me, the standalones are actually easier to do.
Yeah, of course. And not only that, as you go through, you have to be good at making a storyline that is interesting, that keeps people involved with your characters as well, right? You can't just, I guess you could plot them in almost anything, right? But you kind of want it to be good, so you kind of want to do a little bit more to it. So I don't know. It's unique. It's hard. I mean,
it is hard.
I only deal with, so far I've only had published true crime, murder books. Yeah. So you don't really get to choose the ending or whether it's a series.
Right.
It sort of happens. Because when you do fiction like this, you can actually have some sort of justice and ending. Because I sort of don't really believe in a whole lot of justice, or I mean, I shouldn't say that totally, but there's a lot of people that don't think justice is served in a lot of cases. How's that? And
I get that, and that's one of the things being in the judiciary for as long as I have is I understand where they're coming from, but I also understand where where it's coming from on the judicial side, because there are laws that they have to follow too. And so that's unless you're in that environment, a lot of times you don't understand how their hands are tied.
Right. Yeah. It's much more complex than that. It's not as simple as that. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Same with law enforcement when they're doing things. It's like there is what you can do and there is what you cannot do, and your hands are tied. So it's a little different perspective, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when you're doing a series book, as you had mentioned, or even a standalone, how do you keep track of the continuity? Do you have a series Bible, systems, tools of any sort?
Yeah, I use, and my editor got me doing this, who I absolutely adore, Shelley Thrasher. But I do these timelines, although I don't do them on my first drafts. So when I do the first drafts, I'm just blowing through, and I'm not paying attention to continuity. I'm not paying attention to, I am jotting down characters as they appear, so I know who everybody is. But as far as the continuity, any holes, any of that kind of stuff, I'm not paying any attention to it. That starts once I get through the initial draft, because it's like, okay, this is a story. Here's where we start. Here's where we end. Now, as I start going through, at the same time, I'm creating a timeline, and I literally go through, day 1 a.m., day 2 p.m., day and night, all of this stuff, so I can see if I'm jumping times. I can see if everything's moving chronologically. I hopefully pick up all the holes. I mean, I know there's been moments I missed it, and so did everybody else who read the book before we published it, but that helps me a ton. And then the same with, so as I've done this series, when I started those, I pretty well knew how they were going to move along, but I had the same timeline so I could compare everything and make sure that everybody was moving the same direction and keeping all the little ties together. But those timelines are critical for me, or I'd be all over the place.
All right. Kind of like Dave then.
Yeah.
So what do you think people in general, in the public, get wrong about law enforcement? Like, from movies or, TV shows and things like that. Kind of where do you think people miss out?
Well, I think they believe they have more powers than they do. That why can't you just do this kind of thing? I also think timing is off for them, and I think that's television that's kind of created that everything happens fast, fast, fast.
You don't solve a crime in an hour?
Yeah. Get that DNA back in 12 hours? You bet. I mean, it's sort of like even what we did as the canine handlers. So if I went out on a search, a law enforcement search, I mean, sometimes we were looking for missing people. Sometimes we were doing law enforcement requests for things. So people would always ask, well, what did you find? What did you know? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Because my job was to go out there and search the areas that they asked me to search. We go out blind because we don't want to know anything, because it could prejudice what we're looking for. So we simply go out, do our job. If the dog tells us something, we, mark it, and we go back and we turn it into law enforcement and we go home. And that's it. So I don't know what happened from there as a general rule. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you just do your job and you go home, and then you put it in other people's hands. But everyone thinks you know everything and you have all the gritty details, and it's like, nope, no, I do not.
Well, they also think it's your only case.
Yes.
Right. Like you just got one case, for the whole time. You're just working on one case.
Exactly. And they also think, like with search dogs, they think that everything is paid for and that the sheriff's office owns our dogs. And the reality is far different. The reality is we own the dogs. We pay for the dogs. We pay for everything, all the training, all the boarding, everything. Search and rescue is 100% volunteer.
But you'd rather be with the dog anyway. Right?
I would rather be with the dog. It's awesome. Yes, my dogs, I got $1 million into them, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. I remember being a very young kid and my father driving and telling me that you see an animal on the road or a human, you hit the animal. And I was thinking, no. No, hit the human. God, the animal's far better than any human. What are you talking about?
That
hit
human probably has insurance, so there you go.
Yeah, hit the dog? No, I'm hitting the human. The dog's much nicer.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. So, and the paranormal here, like, what aspects of paranormal? So you say you're very interested and you always have that kind of mysterious. So is it like having a psychic involved, or is it having, something spooky and unknown and kind of a ghost? Like what angle do you take?
Oh, all of the above.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have a vampire series, which was super fun. There were 4 of those. And then I've done werewolves. And I have my other series is called The Reluctant Psychic. So I've got the psychics. So Buried Secrets is a little bit of cognition. So we have one of the characters who actually sees things. With her, she sees what has happened in the past. So it's not a precognitive, it's kind of like a postcognitive. A lot of the cognition, I like the vampires. I've always loved vampires. So I was super, super excited this last year at BoucherCon when I got to do a panel with Charlene Harris, because I love my vampires and werewolves. So that was cool.
Well, when you're creating vampires and werewolves, are you using the Hollywood version, or going with folklore, or do you have your own type of your own type of mythology.
Or are you a vampire, maybe? Or...
Yeah.
I am, yeah. Well, when I was a little kid, I wasn't so sure they didn't actually exist. I tell people all the time I used to sleep in a cross all the time, just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do a little bit of both. I mean, now I have a master's degree in literature, and it's specifically 19th century Gothic fiction. So that was like, so much fun to do because I got to do, study Bram Stoker and, all the classics. And my thesis was actually on the 1872 vampire story Carmilla. So I know what the folklore is, and it tends to be your vampires are actually sort of evil, nasty looking creatures. I mean, in Dracula, he is not suave. And so for me, I like to play more with it and have more of the modern incarnation of the vampires, where they're good looking. They might still be bad, but they're not the monster that you see in Dracula or some of the Nosferatu and that kind of thing. So yeah, I take some license with it and kind of sort of create my own folklore.
Use Dave's image then. Rico Suave.
Well, I may rethink that in the next book there. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, he's the big, the suave, sophisticated vampire.
Oh,
dressed to the nines.
Yeah, that's me.
So what's next? What do you got going on now? Do you take a break, or are you writing something else?
I always tell myself I'm going to take a break, and I don't know about you, but I never do. Because I sort of wrap things up, and then I go to my publisher and go, hey, what do you think about this? And but right now I am, like I say, I'm finishing, it's a book called The Guardians. And again, there will be dogs and demons this time. And so that I got to get that turned in when I get back from Left Coast Crime. And then I don't have anything contracted, but I am working on a more commercial thriller. And then I suspect if I hold to course like I have for, a very long time, something weird will pop into my head, and I'll be back to writing something paranormal.
Oh, well, there you go. It's always exciting. Now, so where do people find you, besides in a coffin?
Yeah.
Besides sleeping in a...
Well, I'm sitting here in my office, which, too bad you don't have the camera on, or you can see my lovely collection of ceramic skulls.
Oh.
Yeah, normal decor everyone has.
Of course.
But they can find me at SheriLewisWohl.com, and Sheri is Sheri, Lewis, Lewis, WOHL.com. And of course, I'm on all the social medias, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Threads, and I bailed from Twitter, when the changeover happened, and I've done a little bit on TikTok as writer running. Because one of the things I'm working on is half marathons in every state.
Are you chased when you're running? Or
I know. People ask me all the time, really? Why would you do that? I'm like, I don't know, because I feel like I did something and I like the medals.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Perfect. What else is there?
Said I run for medals and shirts. Yep, there we go.
Well, and for dogs. There you go. Well, now we're going to put everything up on the website, of course, so people can find you and give you some good comments and stuff. Do you like interaction, or do you like reviews and feedback and all that, or people? Or...
Oh, yeah, I love interaction with people. Reviews sometimes are tough because you get same book, you'll get somebody who said, "Oh my gosh, I stayed up all night reading that. It was great." And then the next review will be she is the worst ever.
Right. Yeah.
And so, my poor little feelings get hurt, even though it's okay. It's okay not to like my stuff. It really is okay, but sometimes reading it hurts my feelings.
Yeah. Do you hunt them down then? Do you find them,
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just
no, people are entitled to their opinions. It's perfectly okay.
It's better to stay away from it. Just focus on the writing and don't
Yep,
even
that's
look.
what I do. I just do, and then, but like when you go to the conferences and people stop and talk to you, it's just lovely. It's just lovely.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's all exciting. And you'll be in Seattle at Left Coast Crime,
I will.
giving everybody a bad time. So,
Yep. And then BoucherCon in August.
wow.
So
You get around.
I do like to go places, and yeah, I get around.
Well, there you go. Well, the book, Buried Secrets, and the writer's been our guest, and she does get around. So, Sheri Lewis Wohl, thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Sheri.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.